On a dating site, he found a match so true, a woman named Lilith with eyes deep blue. They laughed and they talked for months on end. In her, he saw a lover and a friend. She seemed so kind, so gentle and sweet, the perfect woman he was thrilled to meet. But as time passed, something began to change. Lilith's behavior grew oddly strange. He brushed it off, said, "Maybe it's stress." But deep in his gut, he felt the distress. One day she proposed, "Let's take a trip, just you and me on a little road dip." Excited and eager, he quickly agreed, not knowing this journey would make his heart bleed. The first few days were pure delight, laughing and talking long into the night. But then one evening, as they drove through the trees, Lilith's demeanor began to freeze. She spoke of her past with a voice so low, a story of sadness, a tale of woe. Her eyes grew distant, her smile a mere ghost, as she portrayed herself as a victim most. He tried to console, to hold her tight, but by morning her mood had shifted to fright. Now filled with anger, a simmering rage, her personality morphed like a turn of the page. Gone was the Lilith he thought he knew, replaced by a woman whose wrath only grew. She screamed and she shouted, her voice a knife, cutting deep into his once peaceful life. Fear clutched his heart, but he stayed by her side, thinking this storm would surely subside. But as the days passed, her hatred took hold, turning her once warm heart ice cold. She'd glare at him with eyes like fire, her words twisted with venomous ire. He felt trapped, but couldn't break free from the woman he thought was his destiny. Then one night, as the wind howled loud, she stood before a mirror, laughing so proud. Her reflection grinned, a twisted sight, her fifth personality hidden from light. This Lilith was different, her mind fractured and torn, a product of pasts both wicked and worn. She giggled and laughed with a vacant stare, a terrifying presence far beyond repair. He tried to joke, to break the ice, but she only laughed, her tone like ice. "I know I'm strange, I know I'm mad, but you'll stay, won't you? You'll be my lad." He nodded nervously, trying to smile, but deep down he knew this would end vile. She whispered secrets of a hidden past, of asylums and treatments, all unsurpassed. She'd been locked away, her mind too wild, her sanity fractured since she was a child. Electroshock therapy, isolation and more had left her psyche shattered to the core. Weeks passed and he tried to forget, but Lilith's true nature was a creeping threat. One evening he awoke in a cold sweat, bound to a steel bed full of regret. The room was dark, the air thick with dread, a chamber of horrors where she was led. Torture devices lined the walls, chains and hooks sharp as claws. She entered the room, a twisted grin, her eyes filled with a maniacal spin. She whispered sweet nothings in his ear, but her touch was cold, instilling fear. She tortured him slowly, day by day, with tools designed to cause dismay. She'd carve his skin with delicate care, laughing as he gasped for air. Hot irons seared his flesh with pain. Each scream he let out was in vain. She'd laugh and sing, a haunting tune, her madness rising with the moon. Days turned to weeks, his hope began to fade as Lilith's cruelty was ever displayed. She broke his bones one by one until his spirit was finally undone. And in the end, as he drew his last breath, she whispered, "I'm your love, even in death." With a final kiss, she sealed his fate, leaving his body to slowly deflate. Lilith walked away, her mind at ease, another lover brought to his knees. She smiled to herself, a job well done, knowing her next victim was yet to come. She met a man, charming, with eyes that gleamed. In his presence, life was brighter, or so it seemed. They danced through days, love's sweet embrace, every moment with him a tender grace. He whispered secrets, promises untold, their future together. In his arms she'd hold. One evening he invited her to his place, a small apartment, quiet, not much space. She entered with a smile, but something was amiss, a smell so foul it ruined their bliss. The stench was thick, like rot and decay. It wrapped around her, wouldn't go away. She tried to ignore it, but it crept in her soul, turning her love into a dark, gaping hole. "What's that smell?" she finally asked, but he just shrugged, his face a mask. "It's nothing," he said, "just the building's age." But her instincts screamed, "It's more than just a stage." She couldn't stay, her mind in a whirl, so she broke up with him, a confused, heartbroken girl. As she left, a man walked by with eyes so cold. Something about him made her blood run cold. She'd seen him before, but couldn't place where. His gaze was like death, heavy in the air. Shaking it off, she walked away, leaving the apartment, her heart in disarray. Months later, she sat on her couch, watching the news, in a worried slouch. The man from the hallway was on the screen, Jeffrey Dahmer, the headlines screamed. A killer, a monster, his crimes laid bare, the horrors he'd committed, too much to bear. She shivered, remembering the day they crossed, the smell in that building, the innocence lost. In a panic, she called her old love, the man she'd left, the man she'd once thought of. He answered with relief she could hear in his voice, and she apologized, feeling she had no choice. "It wasn't you," she cried. "I was so wrong. It was your neighbor all along." He soothed her fears, brought her back near, and they rekindled the love that once was clear. Back in his arms, she felt secure. The smell was gone, of that she was sure. Days turned to weeks. Their bond grew strong, but shadows lingered where they didn't belong. One night, as she lay in his embrace, she noticed a change in his gentle face. His eyes, once warm, now gleamed with fire, a flicker of something, a dark desire. She pushed it aside, convinced it was stress. But soon his love felt more like a press. He'd watch her too closely, his grip too tight, and in her dreams she'd wake with fright. Then one evening he cooked her a stew, a special meal just for two. She ate with a smile, but something was off, a metallic taste. She tried to cough. Her vision blurred, her head felt light. She looked at him, but something wasn't right. His smile twisted, cruel and cold, and then she saw it, the truth untold. It wasn't Dahmer who spread the dread, but the man she loved, with whom she'd shared a bed. He had waited, bided his time to reveal his darkness in the most horrific rhyme. She tried to scream, but her voice was weak. As he leaned in, his words were bleak. "Dahmer was a monster, but so am I, and now, my love, it's time to say goodbye." He took her life with cold precision, her body chopped with brutal incision. He served her remains in a stew so fine, at a food pantry in a twisted design. The town ate the meal, none the wiser, unaware of the horror, the brutalizer, and the woman's fate forever sealed in the darkness where her soul was peeled.